Corruption in boxing, reluctantly back to speak about the farce which just concluded yesterday. Now, first things, never underestimate the predictability of gullibility and stupidity. When you have David Haye, Richard Schaefer, Ismail Salas undertaking their PR exercise, manipulating and convincing the United Kingdom that David Haye is still a viable fighter, that he is in tremendous shape, in the best shape of his life, and he's able to engineer a pay-per-view fight. 20,000 clamouring UK fans flocking the O2 Arena, not to mention how many thousands paid the whatever it was, 25 euros, 20 pounds one-off pay-per-view to watch that farce of a card on Sky Sports box office. You know, David Haye's career is fortunately over, but he has a, you know, he can fall back into a career of politics, because such is his orator ability, his ability just to, you know, propagate a false scenario. To those of us, you know, I mean, who know what we're talking about, we knew David Haye's career was over when he was pulling out of fights against Tyson Fury. His body has just has been on a phased sort of spiral of breaking down. The open workouts were an indication of exactly how the fight was going to play out. David Haye was far too flat-footed in his open workouts. Now, as a fighter who has relied on his athletic gifts for some time, he's a sharpshooter from long range. He's not an inside fighter. So a lot of David Haye's power it's generated from planting his back foot, twisting his back foot, twisting through, you know, the hips, and then twisting through the arm, and then through the knuckle. And that is how he generated his power, you know, talking. But when you've snapped your Achilles tendon, and clearly the surgery didn't rectify the mobility and flexibility in his back foot, that coupled with the bicep tear he had the first time the fight was postponed, and most significantly, he's had a protracted issue of shoulder problems, and we know shoulders are instrumental in the momentum of generating power, speed and power through a shot. So those three physical defects had effectively eradicated his power, and it was obvious in the first fight. You know, Tony Bellew was taking the shots flush. You know, he did ride. He does. You know, Tony does ride the shots, but a David Hayes from 10 years ago would have murked, you know, that full Bellew out, because you can't really say that Adonis Stevenson hits harder than David Haye. But the David Haye we've seen in the last two fights, Adonis Stevens definitely hits harder. It doesn't matter if David Haye is 40-50 pounds heavier. His power is effectively all but eradicated. And Tony Bellew hasn't got a robust chin. Against Adonis, he may have been weight drawn, but that's a bit of an excuse, because this guy is not a conditioned athlete. You know, I mean, look at him in the ring at cruiserweight, light heavy, and at heavy. He's just carrying an enormous amount of timber. You know, he may be 6'3", but a lot of the weight is down due to sort of water retention. It's not muscle which is increasing his body frame. It's fat and water. Because look at his arms, look at his shoulders. I can't see any huge trapezius. So, let's break down this fight. Because it was one of the easiest fights to predict, and I'm extremely grateful to the UK bookmakers once again for their generous odds. 5-2 for Tony Bellew to win on points, and 7-2 for Tony Bellew by stoppage. The bookmakers are just falling into a periodical habit of increasing the surplus of my bank account, so I'm not going to complain. But David Haye, he committed boxing suicide in this farce of a fight, both emotionally, physically, and strategically. With no back foot, he was very front foot heavy. He was extremely emotional. He had one objective, and that was to try and hurt Bellew and knock him out. He may have started reasonably well in the first 2 rounds, using his jab, firing a few long right hands. But he was off balance with a lot of his punches, and he was just, the distribution of weight between the front foot and the back foot was just totally skewed towards the front foot, and hence he was leaning over, no leverage on his punches. The one advantage he had was his wingspan. He does have an incredibly long wingspan, and hence, when he still had his physical attributes, that's how he was able to do damage from long range. Leverage, leaning back on his back foot, and hitting his opponents at the end of his straight right hand, and with quite a bit of acceleration through the punch. When you look at the way he bombed out Jean-Marc Mormac in the cruiserweight, and even the punch he landed on John Ruiz, a long, really fast, explosive right hand, which put former heavyweight champion John Ruiz down. But here he was just leaning over. Bellew showed greater composure, better technique, much better fundamentals. He had a high guard. Bellew was using straight punches. David Haye, when he cut the distance, was throwing wide hooks, and he started engaging with Bellew at short range, throwing hooks, whereas Bellew would throw straight punches and very short left hooks, with not really rotating that much, but timing his left hook, blocking David Haye's left hook with his guard, and then just firing a short left hook, which did the damage on David. Bellew just clearly showed that he's fundamentally he's a far better boxer. He's not an extravagant boxer. He's not even tier 1. He's not even sort of B plus level, despite what he thinks. He's a B minus level fighter, but he still had more than enough. Haye, like a lot of these fighters who rely on their physical gifts, when those gifts have unfortunately rescinded, they don't have any alternative game plans. They can't rely on utilizing a bit more ring craft. Not really an IQ type of boxer either. From being a little bit circumspect, behind the jab, he just went for it, and that was to his detriment. if he tried to keep the fight at long range, even when he was hurt after at the end of the third round, if he'd kept the fight at long range using long jabs, long straight right hands, yeah, perhaps he could have, he could have kept the fight going a little bit longer. But even when he was hurt, he was still determined to push forward. He wasn't doing a very good job of cutting off the ring when he had Bellew trapped up against the ropes. He would fire some wild combination hooks. Not a lot really landing. It did, one or two right hands did land, but Bellew rides the punches well. He's shifting his head back, so he's not taking the full capacity of the blows. Whereas David Haye was walking into the punches, and hence that exacerbated the magnitude of the punch and did the damage. We see that a lot with Amir Khan as well, when he's just walking into punches. We saw a little bit with Isaac Dogbo and Magdaleno coming forward, getting caught with counter left hooks, his momentum carrying forward, and it doubles the impact. And Haye's chin just dented. He was floored, I don't know how many times, 3 times before being stopped. Fight could have been stopped a lot earlier in the 5th or the 6th. He had nothing. He'd clearly gone into this fight knowing full well that physically, he was not. He wasn't even at that level for which a fighter should be able, to even pass a medical. He clearly had no, he clearly had no stability, no foundation on that back foot. And Dave Caldwell and Tony Bellew, they observed that in I think they even mentioned in one of the open workouts that Haye was too flat-footed. He wasn't up on his toes, despite what he was saying in all of the pre-fight build-up. And the United Kingdom public, it just staggers me how they're able to, how they can be infiltrated just by absolute nonsense. What the hell do all of these pundits do on Sky who are analysing the fighters, and they're just hyping the fight to generate revenue for Sky Sports, because ultimately they're employed, but they're not really giving any independent analysis. Paulie Malignaggi, to be fair, he was able to decipher very quickly that there was an incorrect sort of distribution of weight between the front and back foot. David was leaning over, but he was a little bit diplomatic as well, saying that perhaps maybe he's just that is a contingency way for him to fight, given the degree of his injury. Maybe he's just adopted a new style of leaning on his front foot, to wing away punches. But overall, it was a complete mismatch of style, technique, power. A predictable fight. I'm glad Tony Bellew has won, although it would have been magnificent to see that piece of shit being absolutely, sparked out. The audacity of him to say that was the best David Haye we've ever seen. Tony talking about how he really believes he's the Roman general Scipio who's just dethroned the great Hannibal in the Third Punic War. That's the sort of level that he's talking at now, and he's. Oh man, I've really become completely disillusioned with with Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, Sky Sports. You know, my only interest was the Jamie Cox and the John Ryder fight. Jamie Cox was a fighter that I had some high hopes for. I like his aggressive style, but he got caught with a counter right hand from John Ryder. He's showing great power at super middleweight, and Jamie, from being knocked out by George Groves from a magnificent body shot, here was, you know, his equilibrium was just scrambled by really, it was a peach of a short counter right hand in the first round. So yeah, you know, that put a spanner in any of Jamie's aspirations of getting back in the super middleweight title ranks. But apart from that, there was just a number of showcase fights. You know, Joshua Buatsi fighting some southern area level opponents. Luke Campbell as well, rebuilding his confidence from his Jorge Linares defeat. But he had a good showing in that fight, so there was no need to go back to a fighter not even ranked in the top 100. But that's Eddie Hearn for you. Eddie Hearn knows that the general public and the subscribers to Sky Sports will specifically pay for the main event, so he doesn't have any history of stacking up his undercards with any major fights. You know, there was supposed to be one with Paul Butler, trying to re-win the IBF bantamweight title, but Paul Butler, I think it was a deliberate strategy. He knew he was up against a Puerto Rican, you know, a very talented fighter. I think Paul claims that he had insufficient time to reduce his. He only had a month to prepare for the fight, but I think that's garbage. Came in 3 pounds 5 ounces heavy, and I think he might have been about 8-9 pounds heavy on fight night. Tried to use the extra weight to try and bully his opponent, but he was dominated from the first round to the end. The Puerto Rican fighter won the IBF title comprehensively, outboxing Paul Butler, who had no answers. Showed a bit of punch, showed a bit of resistance. You know, the fight could have been over at the end of the first round. He was dropped heavily, I think twice, but he got up. He may have been dropped one more time, but in between that, he was having, you know, minimal degrees of success with, you know, a few body shots. But it's just a predictable rhythmic pattern to Paul's fighting style. We know what he's going to do. He's trying to finish off combinations with that left hook. He's dipping. He's got no head movement whatsoever, and he was able to. Emmanuel was able to, you know, had a great jab and had a great left hook as well. Good right hand, and he used his uppercut very well. Not predictable when he was using it, but he timed it to perfection, catching Paul pretty much every time. What else was there on this garbage card? Anyway, who gives a fuck? So Tony Bellew thinks that he's a better short-range fighter than any cruiserweight, any light heavyweight. But it's funny is he's trying to call out Andre Ward. Tony Bellew's proclivity has been money. You know, Eddie Hearn has more or less stated that both fights were specifically arranged to financially secure Tony Bellew's future, because, you know, Eddie Hearn considers Tony Bellew as a good friend. You know, they enjoy sucking off one another. There was no Tony Bellew in the past was talking about Deontay Wilder and fighting Joseph Parker and challenging for the world heavyweight title. No coincidence. He's retracted from any such bold demands that he's able to fight any of those opponents. He's a little bit buoyant now, obviously, thinking that, you know, he's conquered the beast and now he's invincible and now he can take on all challenges. So it's just that typical UK bollocks that we just see from every fighter after they've won a high profile fight, you know. But it was just a fight, you know, for the casuals. Hardcore boxing fans didn't really give a flying fuck about this fight. Tony Bellew, he'll get knocked out, you know. I pray for that day. You know, on which the doctors at ringside were unable to resuscitate him. You know, I long for that day. David Haye, well, you know, God knows what his financial fortunes are. I think he's pretty much fighting, you know, him and Adam Hoof, if the rumours are true, you know, I mean, lost a lot of money, you know, getting involved with the wrong people. You know, property deals, but, you know, when you're trying to dig into the space of organised crime, people already controlling that territory, then, you know, you're going to get all of your investments stolen, so. But, you know, I mean, he's good on the mic, you know, he's able to manipulate the public, he's a good communicator like that, so he can go back to his Ringstar, you know, Haymaker Ringstar promotions with Richard Schaefer. You know, they've got a good crop of fighters, you know. Actually, Joe Joyce was on the card. That's an interesting fighter. I forgot about he won his Commonwealth title against Linroy Thomas. Disposed of him very quickly, I think within 2 rounds, I think. Pretty impressive. Best way to describe Joe is effective ugliness. There's no finesse to his boxing style. But he doesn't load up, although he may visibly look like he's missing a lot of punches, but he doesn't load up with a lot of punches. Kind of a coarse, rudimentary style, mauling style. The juggernaut, as he calls himself. Bit like a locomotive train, you know, once it's warmed up, he just try and steamroll you. You know, physically quite a big fighter as well, 6'6", good amateur, long standing amateur. You know, Olympic silver medalist, lost against Tony Yoka in the final. You know, perhaps unfortunate not to have won the gold. But, you know, they're pushing him very quickly. You know, he fought Ian Latham Lewison in his professional debut, and Lewison was a very good amateur, beat a lot of good fighters, so, but Ian Lewison had no dedication to his craft, you know, didn't train, he just played Xbox at home, so he just pissed away all of his opportunities in the professional ranks, unfortunately. But now Joe Joyce, who's been calling that Derek Chisora for a while, I think he blows away Chisora. No, I'd like to see Joe Joyce and Dillian White, Joe Joyce and even Tony Bellew. Yeah, Joe, why not, man? Bellew has disposed of the master now, you know, now his pupil. The pupil coming out for revenge, you know, it would be, that'll be an interesting fight. You know, Joe may be inexperienced in the professional ranks, but he's got a great deal of amateur experience, World Series of boxing experience. Yeah, but Tony Bellew is not going to entertain that fight. He's just focusing on prize fighting. He's gonna call out on. He's gonna push for that Andre Ward fight. a lucrative, and because he's got a pay-per-view deal with Sky Sports. I think he's able to have one fight pay-per-view every year in addition to Anthony Joshua. So no doubt Eddie Hearn's going to push on from here and try and get him on a next pay-per-view card against somebody. So anyway, enough of that depressing saga. Thank fuck it's over. Thank fuck David Haye didn't win, otherwise, the public would be clamouring for a rubber match. But that's fortunately not going to transpire now. So, yeah. Corruption in boxing, transmission over.